Okay, welcome to another Falcon 4 BMS tutorial. In this video, we're going to be going over the ground-based FCR, attacking ground targets and buildings, CCIP, CCRP, and dive toss bombing modes. So before we start, we're just going to go over some basic terminology. CCIP is a visual bombing mode in which you don't use the FCR, you're just going to be looking at the target and visually attacking it, and it stands for constantly computed impact point. Okay, it's the most common bombing mode if you're attacking moving objects such as tanks, vehicles. If you're doing precision bombing on individual point targets, you would use CCIP. The other most common bombing mode is CCRP, and CCRP stands for constantly computed release point. And the main difference between CCRP and CCIP is that CCRP, you use your FCR, you're going to see radar contacts on your FCR, you're going to lock them up, and you're typically going to be doing it from higher altitudes of 15,000 or greater. It's used for bombing pre-planned or pre-briefed targets. It's used for attacking targets that are far too dangerous to attack from lower altitudes, where air defenses or terrain makes that difficult or impossible. It's mainly used for, like I said, pre-brief targets. Like, for instance, you have a mission where you have to blow up a power plant, nuclear reactor, a barrack, something like that. You would set a target steer point onto the target, reference it through your DED, and then you would drop bombs on it from high altitude. CCRP is a very finicky release system. It's a very finicky radar system. If you're not flying perfectly, if you're not flying a perfect profile, the bombs won't come off, and it's also more inaccurate than CCIP. But CCIP, again, has some weaknesses as well. It doesn't use the radar, so you have to visually find whatever you're bombing, and it doesn't really work above 10,000 feet. If you try to use CCIP above 10,000 feet, it will actually turn into CCRP, and you're just going to have CCRP cues and attack profile anyway. So that's really what we're dealing with here. So right now, as you can see, I'm in navigation mode. This is when you first get your aircraft, and you've decided that you want to bomb something. So the first thing you're going to do is make sure that your master arm is up and it's armed. You see here the master arm. It's in the up position. The next thing we're going to want to do is cycle into master air-to-ground mode by pressing AG on the ICP, or by pressing enter or backspace on your keyboard. It's one of those. I usually just I also have a bind on my joystick to cycle air-to-air and air-to-ground hardpoints, and I use that to cycle into master modes rather than click the ICP or use my keyboard. So if you have enough buttons to do it, I would highly recommend binding cycle air-to-air weapons and cycle air-to-ground weapons. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to switch into air-to-grounds. So the first thing you're going to notice when you switch into air-to-grounds is it's going to be in CCRP mode by default, and the FCR now has a radar screen, okay? And what it's showing you is essentially a picture of the Earth. By default, in this example, it's scanning 10 miles. You can click these buttons to increase the range of the radar. And on this screen, returns will show up as white dots, white specks, or you'll actually be able to make out buildings using this screen. And as with the air-based FCR, you have, at the bottom left here, you have the target's bullseye position, and below that is your bullseye. And bottom right here, time to target. It'll calculate at your current airspeed and bearing when you're going to reach the target. At the top here, some important buttons. You have GM. This button right here selects the radar mode. and in the center where it says norm, that's an important button. Above that, that will expand the radar mode into 3 different settings. You have expanded, which is EXP. Then you have DBS1 and DBS2, which are Doppler beam sharpening 1 and 2. The most you can zoom in is DBS2, and DBS2 will almost show the radar so highly detailed in DBS2 that it almost looks like a thermal image or a FLIR, something like that. Really high detailed. You can make out, what you're looking at, and that's useful if you don't have a targeting pod or for whatever reason you can't visually identify the target. Now, on the right side, the only thing that you're really going to be worrying about here is just where it says SP. If you click that, it goes into snowplow mode, and when you're in snowplow mode, the radar will constantly scan in front of you rather than be fixed on whatever steer point you have selected. So by default, the radar will show you around where you have the steer point. So if you have steer point 3 selected and it's on 10 miles, it will show you 10 miles within steer point 3. Now, there will be situations where you want to attack something that's not on the flight plan, or you're too far away from the steer point in order to use the radar and you want to scan leading up to it. In that case, you can go into snowplow mode and the radar will actively scan in front of you. And I would highly recommend using snowplow mode when you're attacking ground targets, because all too often you'll fly out of the flight plan and you'll find your radar is blank because you've gone outside the limits of whatever the range is on your radar. So that's the basics of the FCR. Now we're going to go over some really important features of the FCR. The radar mode is really what we're going to focus on here, okay? By default, it's going to be in GM mode. And in GM mode, anything that has a height of about a meter or greater is going to show up as a white contact on the radar. And that includes buildings, trees, bridges, anything. It can also include units, but it's mostly, like, this radar picture is actually very rare. You usually wouldn't see something this clear. You'd usually have hundreds and hundreds of boxes, and it's usually from buildings or other obstacles that are being picked up on the radar. So it's fine if you're bombing buildings. It's fine if you're bombing a pre-briefed target to stay in GM. But if you're hunting for moving targets, which is what most of you are going to be doing, you need to be in GMT mode. And GMT mode stands for ground moving target. The only difference here is that it does not show targets that are stationary, for better or for worse. It will show units that are mobile. There's also another mode on there which might be useful called C, Sierra Echo Alpha, and that mode is for attacking moving targets that are on the ocean. It's basically like GMT, except it's optimized for the ocean. That being said, the procedure for attacking a target in ccrp is rather simple. You're just going to slew your radar cursor over the target, then press TMS up, then you're going to hold down the pickle button and fly into a fall line that appears on your HUD. And you're going to remain relatively level at the artificial horizon. So we're going to go through that very slowly now. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in the snowplow mode, just this way we can find some better targets. And I'm also going to expand the resolution. And we can see here, this is what I was talking about before, we can see here there's a whole bunch of buildings, probably, all sorts of things. And what we're going to do is, we're just going to slew over one of them. We're going to press TMS up. Oh, first things first is you might have to press TMS up to be able to move the radar cursor. Once you do that, we're going to go over a contact, press TMS up. This screen right here represents when the target's locked. When you lock onto something in ccrp, you can't see anything else. It focuses the radar beam on that target, and your picture is blank until you press TMS down and you break the lock. And that's something that I should mention now. If you press TMS down it will break the lock on the target. So just keep that in mind. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my SMS page, and I'm going to select the weapon that I can actually drop in CCRP. And normally you would do this before you attacked, but since this is an instant action, I have a shitload of different weapons, and it's sort of a rare circumstance that you'd be doing this. You would want to do this before you attack. I'm just going to switch into the SMS page, and I'm going to pick some rock eyes, which are cluster munitions. And we can see here on the right MFD, it says the bombing mode next to the mode you're in, the master mode, AG master mode, and then next to it is CCRP. And if you click on that, you can select different bombing modes, the most prominent of which are CCRP and CCIP. So I've selected some bombs that I can successfully drop on a building, say. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to just go ahead and bomb a random building, which is usually not good for people's health, but this is a training exercise. Okay, now what we see here, on our HUD, we get some new symbology. You're going to see this green line falling through the center, okay? That is called a fall line. That is the attack vector that you need to be on in order to drop your bombs. So what you would do is you would maneuver the meatball, which is indicating where your aircraft is heading, so it's centered on that line. So this thing right here needs to be centered on this line, and then you'd nose down a bit so you're level. Then you'd fly into the target while holding TMS down. And the bomb will be released when the computer decides that it's a good release angle. Another feature that you'll see when you're locked onto something is a green box with a little square in the middle, okay? That is showing you what the target is. This way you can visually see the target, confirm that you're hitting the right target. It will display as a box, just like that. And it looks like I'm hitting like a granary or some sort of barracks building or something. I can't really make it out from this distance. Another really important part of the HUD is the bottom right here. When you have something locked up, it will tell you the range to the target, which is the top feature. The second line will be the time to target, and the third line is a combined form of the top two lines. Other than that, the only thing that changes about the HUD is the bottom left here. Nav will be, or whatever mode you were in previously, will be replaced by CCRP. So it's pretty much that simple. So what we're going to do is we're going to fly on the target. It'll take me about 1:51 to get there. And I'm just going to hold down TMS up. So I'm going to unpause and we'll go do that. Doesn't have to be exactly in the center, but it has to be relatively in the center. Now I'm holding down the pickle button. I'm 1 minute out. You're going to see, I can't pause it because I have to do this, but you're going to see a horizontal line fall from the gun cross, and then it's going to get down to the meatball, and then it's going to rise back up. And the second time it falls back down to the meatball is when your bomb is going to release. So there's like a pre-bomb release queue, and then there's a bomb release queue. About 30 seconds out from the target. "25 seconds. Here it comes. 17 seconds. Here comes that horizontal line. You guys see it? It's going to fall down and then it'll come back down again very quickly. Now if that line goes up, then you have a problem. That line... Yep, now that's the final line. I'm holding down pickle the entire time, guys. When that line hits the velocity vector, it's over. Bomb will release. Bombs away. Now, if I was lower, if I was at a lower altitude, it would have taken a shorter amount of time in order to release the bomb. There's a lot of different variables here, and that's why the computer controls when you release, not you. Because as humans, we don't have the mental ability to decide when it's going to be a good time to release. There's dozens of factors here. Wind speed, altitudes, bearing, your airspeed, all sorts of variables. And you'll see as we're moving away from the target, in the bottom right of the HUD, the range is increasing and the time to target's increasing. So I think I pretty much covered everything with CCRP.